for being a few minutes late starting tonight. We just went a little long on our closed session agenda this evening, so thank you for your patience. We do have quorum, but we might just give it just another moment for members to join as we had no break between meetings. Thank you again and welcome everyone. And we will start with our meeting, and I'll just ask Clerk Services to check with Councillor Payne to make sure that she has been able to join and hasn't had any technical difficulties. And then I will welcome everyone again. I hope that everybody's having a wonderful summer. I hope that Council, we take the month of July off. Well, kind of, we had one small meeting, but I hope everybody had a chance to get a little bit of R&R. I was commenting to Council early how this was the fastest July I can ever remember, but we're back here for a meeting tonight. And just before we start, I simply wanted to recognize that we have lost our former mayor, Stuart Fisher, and it was a very sad day. He was in his 95th year, but Stuart came to Innisfil in February of 1958 with his young family and began his career as chief of police for the town of Innisfil. He had an extreme interest in the community, his beloved Stroud. He was president of the Stroud Curling Club. He helped work on getting an ice rink. By that time, of course, the community center wasn't built and they had one outdoor ice rink. His sons would go out with the lawnmower and cut the baseball diamond. So a very, very important part of our history. He served both as he served as mayor of Innisfil. He was my first mayor and one of my mentors. And I would also say that he was the warden of the county of Simcoe in 1992. And also he chaired the Simcoe County School Board. So a really important part of our community. And also he and his family left their legacy here when he donated to our Rizardo Health and Wellness Center and gave us the beloved Betty and Stuart Fisher Family Community Room. So with that being said, I would ask if Council would please join me to rise and have a moment's silence for former Mayor Stuart Fisher. Thank you very much, Council. So as we opened the meeting, I should tell you that this meeting is being audio, video recorded and live streamed on the Town of Innisfil's YouTube channel and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. And for more information on that bylaw, you can contact the clerk's office, sorry. And I would now call on Councillor Van Berkel to deliver the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. The town of Innisfil acknowledges that the town of Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. We, the town, also acknowledge that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Bujal First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and Chippewas of Georgina Islands First Nation. And we thank them for their generous stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Thank you.
Sorry about that. You'd think after 2.5 years I'd learned to unmute myself. So we'll now move on to item 2, the open forum, and we had no one registered to speak in the open forum this evening. Next, we'll go to item 3, which is the approval of the agenda. So the contents of the agenda for this evening, could I ask Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Ices to move and second the approval of tonight's agenda? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. I would ask then if there's any disclosures of pecuniary or conflict of interest on any item on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, if one becomes apparent to you throughout our discussions, please make it known at that time and we'll make sure that the proper documents get out to you to be signed. Next is presentations and petitions. Do we have any of those? No, we do not. None received this evening. So we'll move right into our delegations. We do have 2 delegations this evening, and we're really pleased that our first delegation is 6.1. It's our Innisfil Library Board. And I would welcome Chair Smith and CEO Skuchamari to tonight's meeting. Welcome, and please proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Dolan, Deputy Mayor Davidson, members of council, staff and public. My name is Anne Smith and I am the chair of the Innisfil Public Library Board. Joining me this evening is our CEO, Erin Skuchamari. We appreciate the opportunity to share more information about the restructuring of the Simcoe County Library Cooperative. Next slide, please. Tonight, we will be touching on the following topics: a brief background of the cooperative and the regional government review process, a glimpse at the new service model, and finally, the impacts that this new model will have for our library and our residents. Next slide, please. The County Library Co-op was established in 1940, and Innisfil has participated for over 80 years. There are currently 13 member libraries. The cooperative model is designed to support the common goals shared by the member libraries while recognizing their autonomy and independent decision-making abilities in order to serve the different communities according to their unique needs. The operating budget for the Simcoe County Library Cooperative was just short of $800,000 annually in recent years, representing approximately 0.001% of the county budget. Innisfil's share is 13.27%, or just over $100,000. Next slide, please. This modest budget not only pays for 5 full-time library staff, but also all the services listed on this slide. And I'll just give you a moment to have a look at this slide and see the services provided. Although there are a number of resources and services offered to its members, Innisfil receives fewer services from the cooperative compared to other library systems in the county. And the estimated value of the services accessed by Innisfil residents is over $600,000. We arrive at this value by harnessing the power of consortium purchasing. By pooling our purchasing power, each municipality can gain greater access to resources and services than if they had purchased these items independently. Centralized support and decision-making at the county level leads to streamlined customer service for all libraries, resulting in an efficient and effective service delivery model. Next slide, please. In response to the 2019 formation of the Regional Government Review Advisory Body by the Province of Ontario, the county followed suit, forming a special task force to review a number of municipal services for efficiencies, including the library cooperative. In 2021, KPMG was engaged by the county to perform a service delivery review of the library cooperative. The overall objective of this engagement was to assess the structure, governance, service levels, and provision of library services by the Simcoe County Library Cooperative. As part of this work, alternative service delivery models were considered through an analysis of costing, implementation difficulty, patron needs, governance, and technology. Next slide, please. Consultation occurred throughout the summer with a draft report presented to the Regional Government Review Task Force in September. This draft report had some very concerning recommendations, misleading information, and parts of the analysis were confusing. Instead of focusing on the county library services, recommendations were made for the municipal level. Consultation involved the separated cities of Barrie and Orillia, who are not members of the county nor of the cooperative, and no library-specific experts were consulted. Concerns about the process were raised by the Simcoe County Library CEOs and board members, the Ontario Library Association, Ontario Public Library Guidelines Monitoring and Accreditation Council, and the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries. Many library boards wrote to the consultants and the task force to express their concerns in the fall. We were pleased that when the report came back to the task force in November, the task force recommended to move forward with a modified status quo of the cooperative, while considering other aspects to improve the library system. As you can imagine, it was therefore a surprise that when the review came back to the task force in April 2022 in closed session, and then subsequently reviewed in closed session of County Council on April 26, that the recommendation was now to disband the County Library Cooperative and move towards the model dubbed Information Library Service. Next slide, please. First among those concerns was the lack of transparency and the opportunity for a fulsome dialogue. Library and municipal representatives were minimally consulted, and feedback on decisions that would impact local library service were not taken into consideration. As board chair, I was invited to attend one interview and one meeting of the Regional Government Review Task Force. At this meeting, board members were not permitted to engage in the meeting or provide feedback on the items being discussed. Although library boards and staff were asked to provide feedback, the information and recommendations shared from Innisfil were not taken into consideration. Our board explicitly supported the cooperative model and clearly shared how the cooperative was already meeting the goals of the regional government review. The information and rationale that informed the final decision in April at both the task force meeting and County Council was not made publicly available. Secondly, the final report completed by KPMG used the Ontario Public Library Guidelines to guide their analysis. However, these guidelines were used incorrectly. In November 2021, the chair of the Ontario Public Library Guidelines Monitoring and Accreditation Council issued a statement that indicates, quote, "The researchers misrepresented the Ontario Public Library Guidelines throughout the report and used those incorrect arguments as evidence of inappropriate spending and a need for efficiencies," end quote. This statement was shared with the task force and the consultants. Neither an acknowledgement of this information nor a correction of the misleading information occurred. The Federation of Ontario Public Libraries developed a fulsome data analysis of the county library services in an effort to provide correct information for the task force and the county to consider. In March 2022, the Executive Director of the Federation of Ontario Public Libraries requested the opportunity to provide a delegation to the County Council and the task force. Unfortunately, this request was not accommodated. In spring 2022, the original KPMG report was again referenced as the rationale for disbanding the library cooperative, regardless of the statement issued by the Ontario Public Library Guidelines Monitoring and Accreditation Council. Next slide, please. On April 26, in a recorded vote, County Council voted in favour of the dissolution of the County Library Cooperative. And while the draft review of library service completed by consultants from KPMG indicated that the county's objectives included exploring opportunities to provide improved benefits to the county's member libraries, communities, and library patrons, the information we've received to date does not demonstrate improvements to library services in the county. In fact, the structure of the cooperative actually met the original goals set forth by the province as part of the regional government review process: efficient allocation of service responsibilities, less duplication of activities at the local level, opportunities for cost savings through the consortium model, and effective and responsive service delivery decisions. As the restructuring at the county moves forward, we hope to obtain a clearer understanding of the full impacts of the dissolution of the library cooperative. In the meantime, our analysis shows that there will be direct impacts in the form of reduction of service level to our communities at a time when public libraries will be needed most. I will now hand it over to our CEO, Erin Scucciamari, to deliver an overview of impacts for Innisfil residents.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Next slide, please. In June, Simcoe County's warden issued a letter to all local library boards and councils, which gave a general overview of the elements of the new library model. The letter outlines specific areas of services that the county will provide with the revised service model. Our library board has outlined impacts to services for the Innisfil community in the following slides. Next slide, please. In terms of IT support, Innisfil does not receive IT support through the county. Therefore, any increases to IT services within the new model would not have a direct impact on our residents. The county software upgrades to Office 365 would not have a direct benefit for us or our residents. Next slide, please. However, staffing changes to support the new model will certainly impact the service we receive from the county. The current service model at the County Library Cooperative includes 5 library staff with library training and expertise employed by the County of Simcoe. The new model does not include these 5 positions as part of the staff team assisting member libraries. In its place, there is reference to only staff at the County IT department. This shift presents a concern as the team supporting library services for the county will not be library professionals, something our team has relied on in providing service to our community. Member libraries will be responsible for taking on new roles and responsibilities with the downloading of these functions. The full impact to our staff and the community is unknown at this time. Next slide, please. Innisfil maintains its own integrated library software system called Evergreen and does not participate in the county system, CRC Dynex. Any changes associated with migrating to software as a service would not directly impact our residents, and there is no intention of migrating to the county's proposed platform. Next slide, please. Innisfil is unable to participate in the single electronic library card because, as mentioned previously, we use our own library management software. Innisfil currently has reciprocal borrowing agreements in place with Bradford, West Gwillimbury, ESTA, and New Tech Public Libraries. At this time, we are recommending a review of our current agreement to assess if there will be any implications if other libraries pursue a county-wide reciprocal borrowing agreement. Staff will also assess whether a county-wide borrowing agreement would be in the best interest for Innisfil residents, as there may be a negative budgetary implication resulting from increased shipping and postage, as well as potential service level decreases for Innisfil residents. Next slide, please. The collaboration is a way of life here in Innisfil, and that's one thing that will never change. We will continue to work with county libraries to deliver affordable and engaging programming like Simcoe Author Talks, Simcoe Reads, and work with county services such as the local immigration partnership that rely on libraries as a first point of contact for newcomers to the community. We have received confirmation that Innisfil will continue to receive the cultural services offered by the county, regardless of our level of participation in the new model. Next slide, please. The new information library service will no longer include any physical resources. All 45,000 physical titles currently held by the library cooperative will be distributed to member libraries. As these collections will no longer be maintained or supported by the county collections budget, the physical collection will become irrelevant very quickly. Libraries do not have sufficient space to house these materials, and the county will no longer support rotating these collections, placing the workload and cost on municipal libraries and the onus on county residents to travel wherever the material lives. Although this will not impact Innisfil residents, it will have a significant implication for other member libraries. Next slide, please. There is one section of the physical collection whose loss will be detrimental to Innisfil residents. It is the multilingual, or also known as the World Languages Collection. It is a collection of books and DVDs in over 30 different languages spoken by the residents of Simcoe County. This shared collection, along with other initiatives geared to newcomers in Simcoe County, earned the Minister's Award for Innovation in 2018. As with the other physical collections, the county will no longer support this collection in the new budget, and all titles will be distributed to member libraries, and no rotation of the materials will occur. It would be very challenging from a budgetary, space, and collection perspective to provide a multilingual service based on the new county model. The multilingual service, as provided through a rotating collection model and maintained by the county, offered the most cost-efficient and user-friendly solution for the increasingly diverse populations within Simcoe County. The town of Innisfil has endorsed the advancement of equity and inclusion within our community. This council has reinforced its commitment to creating a safe and inclusive place where everyone feels they can belong and can participate. Through the County of Simcoe's own census analysis, the town of Innisfil has experienced the second highest immigrant population increase in the county, seeing a 41% increase over the previous census, second only to the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury. A county report notes that libraries continue to be community leaders in supporting immigrant residents in our communities. Libraries are a touchstone for local immigrant residents receiving settlement information and support. The loss of the multilingual collection rotation is a significant blow to the tenets of diversity and inclusion, as well as to the support of our immigrant population. Next slide, please. The expertise to manage a collection, such as this special multilingual collection, is beyond the capability of most small to medium libraries. These collections typically house multiple languages in a variety of formats, requiring specialized acquisition, selection, collection development, maintenance, and cataloging skills. A commitment to housing a permanent multilingual collection requires considerable space, in contrast to participating in a rotating multilingual service. Interlibrary loan is an inadequate substitute for a robust in-house collection. Not only is it costly from a staffing perspective, it also puts the onus on the resident to identify materials of interest that are located at other libraries, in comparison to them being able to walk into their local branch and access it conveniently on our shelves. Multilingual materials are more expensive to purchase than English language materials, so budget constraints would undoubtedly inhibit multilingual collection development at the local level. Next slide, please. This quote is from an Innisfil resident and frequent user of the multilingual collection. She shared with us, "I am very happy that the Innisfil Library offers books in my first language. My kids are really enjoying the kids' books as they help to build their vocabulary. The books motivate our kids to communicate in our language, which is an important aspect of our household. The books teach the kids about our culture, and it's very important for our family to try and preserve those traditions and culture. It is great to know that the library encourages and supports multicultural access, as it makes us, the residents, feel welcome in the library and enjoy books in our own language that we are unable to find somewhere else." Next slide, please. Our staff members are also staunch supporters of the service and are aware of its impact on the community. Lucy, who is an immigrant herself, shared, "Every time I get customers who have English as a second language, I promote the World Languages Collection because I know how important it is to preserve our first language. Books, movies, and authors from different backgrounds make people feel less far away from everything that we left behind. As an immigrant, it brings memories from my country. We see residents from Ukraine, from the Middle East, from South America, and many other places that are happy when I introduce them to our world languages collection. The negative impacts that the loss of this service will have are not yet fully known. We are looking for alternate solutions, but these options will have a budgetary impact and may not meet all of the needs in our community. Next slide, please. With regard to databases and subscriptions, which includes our ebook platform Overdrive and databases such as Ancestry and PressReader, the county has confirmed that Innisfil will be able to continue to benefit from shared purchasing and resource pooling for these services. A set funding envelope of $200,000 has been allocated to these resources for all member libraries, and the county has stated that there will be no additional cost to local municipalities. However, at this time, the amount that they have quoted is an estimated and approximate amount currently spent on electronic subscriptions and databases. Therefore, it is still uncertain if the set funding envelope will fully support today's current level of service into the future. We do not have enough information at this time to fully understand the impact to Innisfil residents here. We are very concerned with the cost of ebooks, databases, and digital resources with good reason. Next slide, please. In the early months of the pandemic, use of the library's digital resources more than doubled because people didn't have access to physical collections, and so were forced to use our digital collections. Many have continued to use the digital library on a regular basis, and this may be for a few reasons. They now understand how to use the resources and what's available to them. They have newer, faster access to internet at home. They acquired a device that allows them to access digital resources for the first time. Although these statistics tell a good news story, there is also a significant implication to increase electronic use. Next slide, please. Myths versus facts. There has been a myth circulating for years that e-resources and access to things like Google has replaced the need for physical items, and this is absolutely untrue. Even though our usage of e-resources increased throughout the pandemic, we are now seeing a huge rise in circulation of our physical collection, with usage higher than what we saw in 2019 for our children's and young adult collections. There is still a high demand for physical resources, and relying solely on electronic resources does not provide access to residents with connectivity issues and those without access to digital devices. Electronic resources themselves come with many misperceptions, such as assuming that e-resources are less expensive than physical items, that they enable multiple users at the same time, and that they are irreplaceable and can't be damaged like their physical counterparts. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. For libraries, the ebook purchasing landscape is very different from the physical purchasing landscape, especially when it comes to publisher-vendor relationships. For physical items, most libraries work with library wholesalers who have long-established relationships with publishers and are usually able to provide discounts to libraries due to bulk ordering. This relationship is not the same in the digital sphere. In the US and Canada operates in a similar manner, libraries are able to buy physical books and lend them free of charge under the protection of the first sale doctrine. This agreement does not apply to ebooks because publishers, for the most part, don't sell ebooks directly to libraries, but instead sell digital distribution rights to third-party vendors who then sell lending rights to libraries. This means that libraries do not own any of the digital content purchased through these vendors. Next slide, please. The variety of pricing models results in not only a complex vendor landscape, but also results in enormous pricing variance, as you can see here. That can change with very little notice and can have significant budget implications. In some cases, the library does not have access to the item at all because the publisher sold exclusive rights to another distributor, most notably Amazon. Next slide, please. To further compound the issue, each publisher has different models for pricing ebooks for libraries. Most ebook access through libraries is metered either by time or checkout, or both, meaning libraries have fewer opportunities to buy items that they can keep in perpetuity. These lending terms are determined by the publisher, and they can change at any time and vary widely. Libraries are only able to provide access to a title to one customer at a time. Ebooks are borrowed similar to physical books, so customers have to wait until the copy becomes available or another customer has returned it. This one copy, one user model can create extensive hold lists, where 5 holds could mean a 4 to 5 month wait for one item, and very frustrated customers. With all of this information in mind, the landscape of electronic resources is worrisome for public libraries. Increased demand requires an increased budget, and being confined to a set funding envelope will result in fewer resources and less access for our residents. Next slide, please. The good news story regarding service level impact is that thanks to the foresight and planning of past Innisfil Public Library Board and Innisfil Council, we are in a much more advantageous position to weather the impact of the changes brought on by the dissolution of the County Library Cooperative than some of our neighboring municipalities. Because we have independently maintained our IT services and library software systems, many of the proposed changes under the new information library service model will have no impact on Innisfil residents. However, the loss of the multilingual collection will have a very real impact on our residents, especially as Innisfil continues to grow. And with our unknowns, we still are unsure what the staff changes and the database subscriptions and e-resource purchasing impacts will be to Innisfil residents. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough information at this time to fully understand or predict the ramifications of the changes resulting from the transition away from the library-run cooperative to the IT-run information library services. Next slide, please.
At this time, the future financial implications of the Simcoe County Library Cooperative dissolution and the creation of the Information Library Service are unclear and cannot be quantified. Shifting away from a cooperative model and decreasing the budget at the county level will undoubtedly have cost implications and service level changes. As we've shared, the cooperative budget, originally approximately $800,000, will be decreased to approximately $500,000 in this new model. This service model change translates to an overall savings of $300,000 annually for the county's budget. There is a loss of 5 library staff at the county, which will result in a downloading of more staff time required at the local level, with each library taking on more responsibility to provide service to residents. This is not a modernization of library service. Physical resources are still in high demand, and moving to an electronic-only service from the county has challenges and budgetary implications. Residents will experience service level decreases, especially those in our community who rely on the multilingual collection. The full ramifications will become apparent as we move through the transition process. Of course, any service level changes will be reflected in the 2023-24 library budget. With the information provided by the county to the Innisfil Public Library Board to date, Innisfil residents can expect service level reductions. The board wishes to ensure that council is fully informed of the potential impact, an opportunity to consider council's position if the county service change no longer meets Innisfil residents' needs. Will the funds formally transferred to the county to provide these services be returned to the town? If not, will Innisfil Council support the financial shortfalls? The board wishes to be transparent in sharing the potential need for support from the future council in order to minimize the service level impact on Innisfil residents. Having said that, the Library Board affirms its commitment to ensuring that Innisfil residents have access to the tools, skills, and opportunities that will empower their personal and professional growth. We are strongly committed to the continued exploration of opportunities for collaboration, service sharing, and efficiencies to continue the provision of responsive, high-quality public library service to Innisfil residents. Thank you for the opportunity to present this information. We'd be happy to address any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith and CEO Scucciamari. It wasn't without trying that the Deputy Mayor and I did our utmost, and just for the record, in the recorded vote, both the Deputy Mayor and I voted against the recommendation, and offered an amendment to send it back to library boards for further conversation, and that also was defeated. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And what she said was exactly the truth. We did give it our best shot to try. Just earlier this evening, I did forward a letter I received from Bradford this afternoon at about 5:27. I'm not sure if council's had a chance to read it, but I'm just going to share a story that was shared with me about the multicultural collection and how it impacts Innisfil so much. And the story is there was a couple of kids who have arrived here from the Ukraine and trying to learn English and such. They're adapting to the new situation. However, they were looking to see if there are some books in their own language. And often in the Ukraine, it's written in Russian. These kids wanted Ukraine books, and they were so impressed when they went to a library and they were actually able to get children's books written in their native language. They couldn't believe that this could happen here in Canada. This is one of the biggest areas that's going to impact Innisfil and Bradford at this time. We are getting the largest diverse community ever in Simcoe County, and this is one of the little areas that's going to be taken away from many of the smaller towns. These people will be isolated. So also in this letter that council received just this afternoon, there's a couple of key points in that. First is the loss of revenue. I mean, we are the largest providers to the county when it comes to giving our share of money, and it'd be nice to get some of that money back. It's also clear that this is going to impact us financially in the future in our budgets when we do budget time and we consider how we're going to work with the library to provide a same level of service or an improved level of service. But right now, it looks like we're heading towards a reduction of service and an increased cost at both levels. It's very unfair to the municipality, and it's very unfair to our new residents that are moving here. We have unique needs, Bradford and Innisfil, as we are the growth node sort of for the county. And I really feel that we were side shifted by the county, that they had to give some kind of reduction in cost to the province. And this was the easiest way for them to do it. To me, it was a cop-out. And I'll just leave it at that. But council, if you do get a chance to read that letter, I can send it to staff. And maybe they can make this letter public knowledge, Mayor Dolan, so the public can see what Bradford's facing and what we'll possibly be facing as well. So I would really appreciate if we could do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. I have two questions. One is, since it was a vote by County Council, and the report from KPMG was so flawed, what was the rationale from most councillors to accepting this decision? I appreciate what you and the Deputy Mayor tried to do, but what was the rationale for accepting this? Was there a predetermined decision made that this is the way they wanted to go, or what was the case here? And then I have a follow-up as well. Thank you.
I'll take that if you don't mind, Deputy, and you've got something to add. So, well, first of all, not all Simcoe County municipalities have libraries. So, in fact, the warden is the mayor of Tiny Township. They don't have a library in Tiny Township. And many of the libraries are, many of the communities don't devote as much time and energy into their library system as we do. When the KPMG report, even though it was flawed, did show that libraries are important to us. But I would say that part of the reason was that staff at the county were telling them that it would not cost them any more money, and also that one of the common things that I kept hearing was that this was the only library cooperative left in Ontario, and that they were modernizing the library system. I think a lot of them just decided that the Regional Government Review Service Committee, had done their job, and so if they thought it was a good idea, then we should think it's a good idea. But what really astonished me is, as CEO Scutchmary said, we'll weather this because we have we've already got our own systems in place, but some of the very small libraries very much depend on that physical rotation. And it was interesting that the people representing those libraries didn't voted in favor of it. And then I would finally say that we're very fortunate here that we have such a great working relationship between our board and our council. And we have 2 liaisons from council on our board, and we listen to the subject matter experts, which are our library boards and our librarians. Not all councils and library boards have that same level of openness and discussion. And I believe some members of county council voted without even speaking to their library boards or their chief librarians. So there was, in my opinion, definitely a lack of transparency and a lack of conversation, and not even just with the county, but also with member municipalities and their own library boards. Anything to add, Dan?
Mayor Dillman, I think you really covered it pretty clearly. And I think there's the last thing. To be clear, the county made significant cuts, slashing its annual budget for libraries by removing all budgets for physical collections and limiting 5 library positions, reducing the allocated funding for the new system to just $200,000. They basically used this as a chopping block. And like you said, I don't think a lot of the councillors were really aware how this is going to impact them in the future and impact their residents. And maybe some of them won't be reelected again, but you know what? It's going to hit down the road. It's not going to be pretty for people who are trying to use the library, especially when the economy is slowing down and they can't go buy books and magazines and such. This will impact them over the next few years. It's sad. Thank you.
Just before I go back to you, Councillor Waters, I'd ask if Chair Smith or CEO Scucciamari had anything further to add to that first question.
Through you, Your Worship, just to add, I think that we brought forward some of those common myths related to library service, and I think that some of that misunderstanding of what a library does for its community still exists. And so to know that we were moving everything electronic may be that there is this perception that that is a modernization of library service. Being the last cooperative in Ontario perhaps gives the opinion that it is an outdated model, whereas a cooperative is actually, as Chair Smith said, meeting the goals that we have been set forth with the regional government review. So I think that there is just not enough information being shared and that not enough awareness for some of the councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Since we do have such a high-quality library service in Innisfil, and that we'll probably be able to weather the storm on this one, is there an opportunity for our library to provide services to some of these other communities for a break-even fee or a small fee for those services? So is there an opportunity for us to share our expertise and our enthusiasm for books and what we do in the community with other communities in Simcoe County?
CEO Scucciamari.
Thank you. To your worship, to Councillor Waters. Absolutely, there are opportunities, one, for sharing resources and information. As we said, we do collaborate with local libraries across the county on a number of different events, and that will continue in looking for other opportunities to share information, share programming opportunities. And we are looking into reciprocal borrowing across the county. Some library boards across the county have made a decision to move forward with reciprocal borrowing countywide. It is something that we will have to look at and assess in terms of what resources we would be able to offer to other libraries across the county. Our programming at this point for especially preschool and half lab programming, we already have significant wait lists for our own community. And so opening that up to others across the county could be problematic. And there is some implications with digital resources. So databases that we purchase ourselves, we do purchase them and we're quoted on our population size. And so that actually impacts the cost of that database for our libraries. So there could possibly be implications if we're opening it up for all libraries across the county, but it's certainly something that the library board will be looking into.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been following this with Councillor Sadi on the library board for a while now, and there's a few things that just keep on rubbing me the wrong way with this. They're placing all the risk in our laps, and if it goes well, they get all the reward. They look good for doing things that they don't have a full understanding of. We talked about the multilingual community that we have. We have Russian-speaking, Ukraine-speaking, and Latin-speaking populations that are growing significantly in Innisfil and Bradford. The $200,000 envelope, nowhere does it take into account inflation, supply, demand. If there's a cost increase, what do? It lands in our laps. Ms. Kukumari said, what we said is inconsistency in the availability. If a supplier suddenly decides to take an item off the shelf, electronically speaking, what do? We have to go search elsewhere. And then if the cost increases, that lands in our lap again. It's not reasonable when we purchase, for example, the paper books, the solid books. We know that we're getting X number of books. We can hand it at X number of times to X number of people, no matter the language, no matter the thickness, no matter the wording, no matter if it's children's books or mystery. They're putting us in a position where they're backing us into a corner where we have to adapt all the time to a shifting sand of supply and demand. I don't agree with any of this, and I fully support the board and how they're trying to mitigate this to the best of their ability. I have nothing but faith that they can, but it's not an easy task and not one I envy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sadi?
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank Ms. Kuchumari and Board Chair Ann Smith, and the passion and the concern that we hear in your voice is valid, and residents needed to hear this presentation, and council members. It will impact the next term of council. The impact of the dissolution of the library cooperative will have consequences, and it will have consequences to the service level in Innisfil. We may be able to weather the storm, but it will have an impact, and probably budgetary as well. So it's something that at least you're putting the tickler out there for this council and the next term of council, that it's something that they may have to consider. And, like Councillor Fowler said, we both sit on the board, and as one board member had said, in regards to the loss of the multilingual cultural collection, imagine a new resident in Innisfil not being able to read a book in their own language. And that's the only opportunity they have, because they haven't perfected the English language yet. And that in itself is just unimaginable. And I want to thank the Mayor, Your Worship, and Deputy Mayor Davidson for speaking on behalf of Innisfil libraries and the other libraries in opposition to that dissolution and the impact that it will have, because it will. And but we have a very strong library board, and a committed one. Thank you for your presentation, and I think this is something that everybody needed to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Orsatti. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I thank you for being here at our request to come forward and explain this to us and the consequences. Now the decision is made. To say heels are dug in would be an understatement. So this is going forward. So my question to you would be, both to you, Chair Smith and CEO Kuchumari, is where do we go from here? I believe the county is waiting on an answer from the library board. If the board has had the opportunity to respond back, and I understand that you're looking for multilingual resources in other places, and just what next steps are for the board.
So at this point, the library board did issue a response to the county following the June council meeting, where this information piece was deferred to this council meeting. letting them know that there was that the correspondence was deferred until August 10th, and that we would formally respond to their request after August 10th. And did have a few questions. One was, could we participate in parts of the model, but not the full parts of the services? So for example, the ILS system, which is evergreen for us, we have no intention of migrating to CRC Dynex. So we did hear back that we would be able to participate in the e-resources and databases, as well as the cultural services, regardless of the level of participation. We do have questions still about the $200,000 funding envelope, and also questions about how we will move forward with an agreement. The library board was in preference of a service level agreement, and the response would be that we would have a general MOU outlining the services that would be offered to all the member libraries, not specific to Innisfil. So I think at this point, the library board will now be responding to County Council again after today's meeting. So we will be reconvening to determine what the best response would be. But in our June meeting, the library board did move forward with a recommendation that we would continue to participate with e-resources and databases, as well as the cultural services, if it was offered to us. Chair Smith?
No, I agree. I have nothing else to add to that. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both very much, and know that you have the full confidence of council to do its best for the residents of Innisfil. We know that the board will always do its best for Innisfil residents, and we very much appreciate you being here tonight. And could I ask Councillor Orsatti and Councillor Fowler to move and second the recommendation that's on the screen to receive this delegation as information? With thanks. All those in favor? Any opposed? That was carried. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next delegation is from Jennifer Lloyd, Community First Assistant, and we're going to hear about our Community Needs Assessment Project update. Good evening, Ms. Lloyd.
Good evening, Mayor Dolan, Deputy Mayor Davidson, members of council, staff, and the Innisfil community. As mentioned, my name is Jennifer Lloyd, and I'm the town's Community First Associate. I'm pleased to be back with council tonight to present you with a final update on the town's Community Needs Assessment Project. I'll provide a brief summary of our recent community engagement, highlight some of our achievements over the past 2 years, and outline our next steps as we look to the future. Next slide, please. Over the past 2 years, the town of Innisfil, the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, and our corporate partners have been working together to support Innisfil residents, local businesses, and community and social service organizations through the COVID-19 pandemic. To guide this work, you will recall that the town led the development of a community needs assessment in the spring of 2020 to gather local data about the community's short-term and long-term needs as a result of the pandemic. 65 recommendations emerged under 5 key areas of need: mental health, access to information, economic security, employment, and community building. In November of last year, I presented council with some of the many project highlights from 2021. At the time, we were in the middle of checking in with the community to reassess community needs, to learn if and how the town's COVID-19 response was helpful to residents, and to identify strengths, community assets, and resident priorities for COVID-19 recovery. Next slide, please. Our engagement prioritized hearing from residents and meeting them where they are by being present in popular community spaces. Staff completed over 50 hours of community engagement in 12 locations across 7 Innisfil neighborhoods. We reached 377 people through our survey, community outreach, interviews, and listening sessions, and these folks represented at least 14 local organizations. 97% of those engaged were Innisfil residents, and the other 3% were staff and service providers. Next slide, please. So here we're seeing a few photos from our youth engagement. On the left is a word cloud made during a virtual session from youth's anonymous responses to our question about challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic. And on the right, we're seeing some photos from an in-person youth listening session where we did some interactive activities that gave participants the opportunity to brainstorm together and share their thoughts and experiences with other youth. Before we move on, I just want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank everyone who participated in the engagement, whether they stopped to talk to us in the community or participated in an interview or listening session. Each one of us has had our own unique experience living through the pandemic. And as I reflect back on the engagement experience, I'm overwhelmed, but also truly honored to have been trusted with residents' stories of struggle and resilience and community and care during the pandemic, as well as their ideas and their hopes for the future. So with that said, there's no way we could have captured or summarized all that we heard, especially in tonight's short presentation, but our staff report and the next slide will highlight some of the themes and trends in the community while recognizing that these may not represent the experiences of all residents. Next slide, please. So very briefly, we heard that mental health, income, access to food and or essential items, employment and community building remain high need areas, while physical health and access to services emerged as higher need areas during our check-in than during the 2020 research. In addition to these areas of need, growth, sustainability, and equity and inclusion were predominant topics in our conversations with residents about COVID-19 recovery. We learned that residents felt significantly less connected to their community during the COVID-19 pandemic. And while it's important to focus on community needs, we also wanted to hear about Innisfil's strengths and assets. Residents identified over 65 community assets, including the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, community organizations, businesses, sports organizations, and even individual residents, as well as council and staff members. Physical spaces like Lake Simcoe and Innisfil's parks and recreation centers were also identified as community assets. So as mentioned, there's a lot more information about what we heard in the staff report, and this data will inform our next steps as well as other town projects and strategies. Next slide, please. Due to the work we've done to implement the CNA recommendations and integrate the 5 pillars into our regular service delivery, we are bringing the Community Needs Assessment project to a successful close. I am pleased to share that 52 of the 65 recommendations, or 80%, have been actioned or implemented. Of the 13 that have not been actioned, 9 were determined to be beyond our scope or duplications of existing community services, and 4 have not been started but will be carried forward or actioned in the coming months. 50 new projects and initiatives were implemented to address our community's needs during the pandemic, in addition to adaptations and expansions of existing programs and services, and the support we provided to community-led initiatives. The CNA project was highlighted in over 20 local media stories, which does not include the many other media pieces about projects born out of the Community Needs Assessment. And we collaborated with more than 65 other organizations, including residents groups, social service providers, local businesses, as well as other levels of government. Internally, we established a community first team and saw increased communication, collaboration, relationship building, and information sharing, as well as improved service to residents because programs and services were responsive to their needs and staff were equipped with more information about town and community resources and services. The staff report includes a full update on the status and achievement of all 65 recommendations, but I want to highlight some of the most impactful ways we supported the community over the past 2 years. Next slide, please. The Helping Hands micro grant program, funded by donations from council, town staff, and the community, supported 82 families to buy groceries and medicine or pay their bills at the start of the pandemic. The 3 Troy Scott community fridges established during the pandemic have become pillars of support, mutual aid, and food security in Innisfil, with at least 9,000 items donated and distributed to residents in the first year alone. The Innisfil Community Foundation granted $103,000 to grow the Canadian Mental Health Association of Simcoe County's free peer support program, allowing them to train 13 new peer support workers and 30 volunteers to expand access to peer support for mental health and addictions in Innisfil. And the town supported this expansion by actively promoting the program on social media and through various print resources. Over 25,000 free trips were taken to and from essential locations like grocery stores and pharmacies through Innisfil Transit's Essential Trips Assistance Program. Next slide, please. In 2022, the town's partnership to cover delivery fees for takeout orders from local restaurants with Innisfil food delivery startup What's for Dinner Today drove more than $100,000 in revenue to restaurants in our community through 2,209 resident takeout orders. DMZ Innisfil was established through a partnership with Ryerson, now Toronto Metropolitan University, to support local emerging tech startups. The town currently supports 24 startups, which have collectively raised over $3 million in funding and created more than 100 new jobs. The Innisfil Idea Lab and Library distributed 2,341 seniors craft kits in 2020 and 2021 to support seniors experiencing social isolation and help rebuild a sense of community. And finally, town and library initiatives like the Hope Tree, Fresh Air Flicks, and Neighborhood Nights brought hundreds of residents together at a time and thousands in total, showing us just how essential community is to our lives and to our well-being. Next slide, please. So over the past 2 years, we've put in a lot of work to support our community, but we have to acknowledge that economic hardships, housing, food security, and mental health challenges, issues that existed long before the pandemic began, continue to persist and have worsened during the pandemic. This is why the community building and community development pieces of the CNA will transform into a more robust community neighborhood resilience strategy. This strategy will contribute to our ongoing work to address community needs, strengthen community relationships, and transform the way the town works alongside the community. The 4 areas of focus for the community neighborhood resilience strategy will be relationship and partnership development with the community to facilitate information sharing and collaboration, civic engagement to support resident leadership and volunteerism, community building to increase social capital and promote neighborliness, and organizational development to continue to strengthen our internal community first approach. Next slide, please. We have witnessed the very best of our community through the pandemic as people have stepped up to really take care of each other. Our communities become more resilient when residents have the relationships and the resources to support each other during emergencies and crises. This type of collective care can be a catalyst for social transformation if we build on the momentum that we've gained during the pandemic by continuing to prioritize this work. And so we're grateful to Council for having the foresight to approve the Community Neighborhood Resilience Strategy in the 2021-2022 budget. On that note, I'd just like to sincerely thank Council for their ongoing support for the CNA project as a whole, as well as all of the initiatives and projects that stemmed from the community's recommended action items. I think the willingness to listen and learn from and work alongside our community has truly made an impact and will leave a legacy that will extend far beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd also just like to give a shout out to our Community First team members, both past and present, who became the CNA champions in our organizations, and all of the town of Innisfil and Innisfil Idea Lab and Library staff for their dedication and hard work over the past 2 years. This project truly spanned across our organizations, and every single department contributed in some way. Finally, while our staff report and presentation has focused on the town and library's efforts during the pandemic, the community deserves a tremendous amount of recognition and thanks for the projects and initiatives that they organized and led to address community needs and support each other. So we will continue to build on Innisfil's strong community spirit to take the next steps in developing our community neighborhood resilience strategy. And we look forward to continuing to work alongside residents, businesses, service providers, and other stakeholders to address our community's evolving needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. You stole my line, which was going to be about we certainly led the charge, but the community really stepped up. I received a letter once a long time ago after we had an ice storm and things. We lost power in the entire municipality for about 2 days. And I received a letter from a resident who said how they didn't really feel connected to their community until that emergency. And then everybody was out on the street and sharing food and blankets and inviting each other over, and how it really made their street a tight-knit community. And I think the same over the pandemic. I think a lot of people I know supported the restaurants and ordered takeout all the time when they wouldn't necessarily do that, and just really looked out for each other and made phone calls to neighbors who were maybe alone. So a big shout out to your team and to the entire community. questions or comments regarding the community needs assessment or the reformation of it? Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to extend a genuine thanks to Jennifer and her team. During this time, a lot of people focus on the medical wave that comes with COVID, the financial wave that hits. But one thing you did focus on, which really impressed me, was the mental health wave. It's the longest one we have. It is affecting all age groups, all genders. No one's left out. And now that we're coming out of the first two, the financial and the medical, and we're getting that under control, we still have the need to handle the mental health wave that's following, which is the biggest of them all. So for all your efforts, for inspiring the community to do good and working with everybody, like, kudos. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Jennifer, and to all the team working on that, echoing Councillor Fowler's comments. I think this was a well-written report, a lot of work behind it, and it's really easy to spell out, and it's not a surprise to any of us. But to see the items, or as Councillor Fowler had mentioned, that one of the top citizen concerns was mental health, and that continues to always be there. But always repeated with that is the information or the response back that they don't know where to go to get the help. And I think if this identifies that as a municipality, that we need to be better at looking at different communication strategies in how do we get that message out to residents of where they need to go to. And, you've just by identifying these, it makes it easier moving forward to look at where we need to do the improvements. And also with the connectivity, I think it's no surprise to anyone with everyone with the pandemic, with the volume of people working at home, suddenly realizing they did not have a reliable internet connectivity to access services, to do their work at home, and everybody was scrambling. So again, identifying that, and it's something that Enterprises has on their radar and is working on as well. And the affordable housing locally, and mentioning the opportunities, with the future planning to look at waiving or the fees and DC charges to encourage developers to start building affordable housing. But I also think that, when we look at other cities and municipalities where what they do is when they're building new apartments that are rental or condos, that a certain percentage of those buildings have to provide scattered affordable units so that it's not a floor that you go, second floor is affordable, but they're hidden throughout a building. And it's another way of doing it. So lots of opportunities for the future. And this is a great report. Thank you for providing that.
Thank you, Jennifer. And just finally, I did attend the Troy Scott Memorial Golf Tournament back about a month ago and had the opportunity to thank the Troy Scott's family and friends, and received a donation. So yeah, it was nice to be able to have that opportunity. So with that, I'm not seeing any more hands. Thank you for being here, and I would ask Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Ices to move and second receiving this report as information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Ms. Lloyd. Next is item 7, and it is the update. Any municipal associations, I know a lot of them have been on a bit of a summer hiatus, but any updates from any Deputy Mayor Davidson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Got to get both computers up and running. I just want to make the announcement that the county, coming from this last topic we just had about mental health and with Councillor Fowler's words, The county this week, we approved a modular type 50-bed dormitory, bedroom style structure to be used as temporary homeless shelter facility at 20 Rose Street in Barrie. It's a modular unit. It'll have a kitchen, offices, bathrooms. There'll be a place where people can get help. And all the two, Barrie and Aurelia also got on board and supported this at the county. It's something that's going to be really badly needed this winter. As the hotel motel concept that we had used through COVID to get these people off the street into safe situations, that's coming to an end very quickly now at the end of the month. Actually, under July, it came in under the end. So yeah, we'll be able to really take care of a lot of people this coming winter and make sure that they're safe. And then hopefully this unit can be moved around. So that site will be developed later. It can be moved to another location, and maybe with the county's help, we may be able to build something more structurally sound for the homeless that are dealing with the fallout from COVID. So I think the county's moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to let Council know that after the past few years of virtual meetings, the Board of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority will actually be meeting in person for the first time on August 26, 2022. And I believe we're actually going to have a staff and board barbecue afterwards just to get reacquainted. Unfortunately, just near the end of our term, but at least we're getting back to some normality at the NBCA as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with updates from committees that they sit on behalf of Innisfil? Seeing none, I would just ask the clerk's office that perhaps we could update item 7 to remove the emergency operations centers update, since we no longer are in a local state of emergency, and hopefully we can leave that off for a while, and I hope I'm not jinxing it by taking it off. Thank you, Mr. Corrigan.
Thank you, we will.
All right, so now we are at the time in our agenda where we have a consent list. So for those who don't often attend council meetings, we have staff reports that we've all had for a week and gone through. Each one is accompanied with a staff recommendation. If council is happy with that staff recommendation and has no questions, at the end of the meeting with our confirmatory bylaw, we will confirm all those actions. But quite often, if we want to have further debate, we will refer those to committee, and then we will resolve into committee of the whole and have good fulsome discussion about them before either having an amended recommendation or approving the current recommendation or deferring. So with that, I will start going through all of the items and look for anybody who wants to refer any of the items. So A1 is the special council meeting minutes dated June the 15th. A2 is the special council meeting minutes dated June 22nd. A3 is the council meeting minutes from June the 22nd. And A4 is the special council meeting minutes dated July 19th. We had no reports from various committees, so we'll now go to the staff reports. C1, the 2021 consolidated financial statements. Councillor Arsati.
I do not need to pull it, Your Worship, just ask one question.
Go ahead.
If I may ask Mr. Melanishin or Ms. Webb, if there was a new project in that item, it was new project economic development strategy master plan, request for DC 50% and 50% ARS, alternative revenue. And I just wonder what the DC intent to include that in future DC charges. Will that then raise the DC rates as a result of that, or is that a one-time covered? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melanishin and Ms. Webb.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Orsatti. I do think the item that you're referring to may be in our Q2 report instead of this report. But I can still answer it.
Go ahead.
When we do make that statement, whenever we have a project that we say that has a growth component to it, the legislation says that council must make it known that they intend to include it in the next background study. So when we go to update the next background study, we will include it. And, you know, at the time when we do an update, you know, all the projects are revisited, costs are updated as required, growth is updated and so forth. And, you know, generally, you know, the rates change during those updates. So it would be included in the next update and the rates would be adjusted accordingly. Have I answered your question?
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Does that answer your question, Councillor Orsatti?
It did, and it's in page 8 of 17 of the report. Which is
the next report. But is there any questions about the consolidated financial statements?
No.
Seeing none, then any other questions about item C2, which is Q2 report? Seeing none, then item C3, the administrative monetary penalties report or request to go to MTO. Seeing none. C4, the transportation master plan. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I don't need to pull this item. I just wanted to.
Would you mind pulling it? Because I did have a couple of questions.
Okay, yeah, I could pull it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Item C5, the fire consolidation appointments to interim governance committee with the terms of reference. Item 6, the Innisfil Transit Infrastructure Canada grant and update. And then items D, this all of the staff reports. So there's the CAO action plan update, the Orbit Sustainable Development Plan checklist, the County of Simcoe MCR update number 5. Councillor Waters.
Can I please pull the Sustainability Development Plan checklist?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I don't need to pull the MCR update, but I would just at this point say that the new information that yesterday the County of Simcoe approved phase 1 of the MCR, which was approved. It wasn't approved by much of a margin, but it was approved, and it's just step 1. The idea of expanding settlement boundaries will happen in the next go around, but it wasn't unanimous, but it did pass. And then we had items D4, which is the building permits issued, Q2, and the staff report about Churchill Downs allocation update. So we're seeing none there. And then we go to bylaws. There's a number of bylaws. The first one was the amendment to the town zoning bylaw, bed and breakfast as short-term accommodations. And E2 similarly, but with the Our Shores planning permitting system. E3 was the assuming certain lands into the town's road system. E4 was to appoint a building inspector. And Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I had a question on that. Just the title, I had not noticed before that we had specifically had plumbing kind of highlighted when we did hired a building inspector. Is that something that is new, or have we always called that that position by that name?
I'm looking for Mr. Vickers. I do not. Oh, there he is. Mr. Vickers, is that new, or if we always called them building inspectors and plumbing?
Your Worship, we've the plumbing code years ago got incorporated into the building code. So for as long as I can remember, we've been looking at building and plumbing. It's kind of a legacy piece from the time when they were separate. But we do look at plumbing and we look at buildings. We don't look at electrical. That still is a separate code, and the Electrical Safety Authority looks after electrical. I don't, and I'm not sure. I'd have to look back at our wording to see if we've pulled that out and made it separate. If we have, that's sort of accidental, and I apologize for the confusion. But for some number of years, building inspectors are looking at plumbing systems. And so are inspectors of both, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, it does. It seemed odd. I'm glad you clarified with the electrical part, because when I think of building inspection, I just think of everything included. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Next is item F1, the special event at the Jordan Bay Steam Show grounds in September. And then correspondence for information. We have the library board minutes. We have the police service board minutes. We have county council highlights. We have a thank you letter from Premier Ford, and then several proclamations: International Overdose Awareness Day, National Coaches Week, and Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. All right, so that gets us through our list. So then item 8.1, could I ask Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Orsatti to move and second that the consent list and recommendations contained therein be adopted with the exceptions of the two pulled items, C4 and D2. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And item 8.2, resolve to committee the whole, ask Councillor Waters and Councillor Fowler if they would move in second, resolving into committee the whole. All in favor? That is carried. All right, so now we will go to our first item, which is the Transportation Master Plan. And Councillor Ices, could you get a seconder for me, please?
Yes, Councillor Nicol, please.
Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to just update from the last public meeting that we talked about this transportation master plan, which is pretty significant. I feel that we're planning ahead to 2051 when our population will be projected to be over 80,000. And I had some concerns at that public meeting about agricultural equipment and how that moved through the town to access those important areas that where farmers are growing crops and producing food for our residents and our communities. And I was so I had a bit of back and forth with staff on the best way to do that. So I just wanted to thank staff for accommodating some of those comments, and there was some revisions to the plan that showed up, and I wanted to thank them for that. So that was my reason for wanting to talk about this item.
Thank you, Councillor Ices, and thank you for reaching out to the OFA representative to get feedback from her too. So that was really helpful. Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a couple comments I just want to make on this report. One was the under the roads, the 7th line planned road improvements. I know that has been a topic of concern for many residents between Ward 2 and 3. And this way, residents will see that the urbanization of this from 20th to St. John's, we're looking at 2031. So that's 9 years from now. And addressing that, it was noted that this is a heavily used road. There is no walkability at the present time, and there is pedestrian safety concerns that have been expressed by residents in the past. But having these items in the report lets residents know the plans for the future, and they're not being dropped off, and it may not be happening as quick as we want. but everything's being phased out. One of the other items that I want to just talk about too was the potential improvements to address road safety. In that, it talked about Innisfil Beach Road, St. John's, and the problems with the Tim Hortons and the high level of small motor vehicle collisions. And I just hope that in future planning applications that come forward to the town for drive-through food facilities, that we take into consideration the lineups. This is a commuter town, and the lineups, when they are on major roads, they back up and they interfere with residential streets and onto streets such as Innisfil Beach Road. And so it's something that we really need to pay attention to, no matter if they say that, oh, 7 vehicles is enough, it's not. That, and then just I was glad that with the parking management strategy, addressing the parking concerns that they're addressing for Alcona, Cookstown, and the future concerns. And just, it was probably should have been in the other item on the transit, but with the transportation master plan, we are hearing from residents the concerns with the reliability of Uber drivers. So I'm happy to see that this also covers future transit and what that will look like in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sadi. Mr. Deloitte, did you want to respond?
Yes, 2 things. Drive-through restaurants are bedeviling everyone everywhere, and there are significant lineups. I can assure council that we are reviewing all of our zoning equivalents through our development permit system, and we'll make sure that's dealt with and ensure that sufficient queuing, on-site queuing spaces are there so vehicles aren't backing up across sidewalks and onto roads. That's a very dangerous situation. So, I just wanted to assure you of that. And the transit, we're getting to the point where we need to do something and migrate or evolve our system. Our transit folks are actively working on that. And in this agenda, you can see there's a transit master plan that's going to be delivered. So council will be very involved in that. We want to take our transit to the next level, commensurate with our growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deloitte. And one of the good things about having the Uber currently is getting the data from them. So when we did a more traditional transit consultation many years ago, and we would, go to the library and ask people, do they want transit? And they'd say yes. And they said, well, where would you go? And they didn't know. So now we know where people are going. We know when they're going. We know how many of them are going there. And so we can use that data to make sure that when we do high occupancy vehicles and fixed routes, that we can use that data to make sure that they're not running around in a circle with nobody in them. I saw Councillor Waters' hands.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just 2 comments. I'm glad that Leo mentioned the transit master plan because I keep on referring back to one of our residents who provided some very, very detailed analysis around transit. So I'm assuming that we will be more engaged in that type of process and some of those types of details that were revealed during that thing. So I'm glad he mentioned that master plan. So I'm glad to hear that. The other point I want to make is something that Councillor Asadi mentioned was drive-throughs. There are several communities now revisiting drive-throughs in terms of not only because they're a safety hazard on roads, but they're a climate change disaster in terms of people sitting there when long lineups just having their cars run. And so don't know whether or not the director has thought of the idea of banning them outright and just increasing some parking where people can actually park out of their vehicles, go inside and get their coffee, as opposed to sitting there idling for, I'm guilty of it as well as everyone else because we get caught in that quickness that we want to have. Just whether or not that's a possibility down the road, whether or not we would consider that dramatic move.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, in my previous life, we have banned drive-throughs in the downtown area where there's short sight lines and lots of pedestrian traffic. And certainly we do understand the greenhouse gas emissions of the drive-throughs. The pushback comes, of course, from the restaurateurs who are telling me, and this was a few years ago, 40 to 60% of their revenues are derived from drive-throughs. So I think we'll have a spirited conversation if we want to pursue that.
I agree. I'm sure probably that demand has been driven that way, but people are not going to go without their coffee. They're still going to stop. So to say that they'd lose all that business, I think there might be a small decline, but I think that people were still going to demand their coffee, and they're going to get out of their car and actually get on their feet and walk in and get one. So it's just something to consider, because I know several communities have done that. And the downtown core, especially the one in Ward 4, might be one of those ones to consider that around, because there's always backups right onto the road there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Waters, there is a segment of Ward 4 and right now that doesn't allow drive-throughs, and the reason that sticks out in my mind is because as soon as we passed that zoning for the Innisfil Beach Road corridor, we had a delegation from Heather McDonald from People's Credit Union asking for an exemption because they'd already bought a building and had just planned on putting a drive-through for their bank in, and we exempted her from that. I couldn't tell you exactly where it starts and where it ends, but there is a section that currently doesn't allow drive-throughs.
Thank you.
Sure, planning staff can give us more information on that. Other questions or comments on the TMP? It was quite a hefty document. Mr. Deloitte?
If I could, Your Worship, I just want to thank our technical team, our consultants, and staff for doing such a great job. This is a very large update, and the conclusion of the study stresses the importance of ensuring your transportation and transit systems are in sync with your growth. If the growth gets ahead of your transportation, even though we're getting going, that becomes a real growth problem. And so I think this master plan bodes well for preventing future problems and synchronizing growth and transportation and transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deloitte. I had two comments and a question. The first one is on page 79, 6.2.3, which is the Simcoe County Links Transit. So it mentions and it talks about that there's no transit routes directly serving the town of Innisfil, which is true. I think because we have the GO bus line going up and down County Road 4, that was part of the reason. But also the fact that there was one route that was supposed to come into Innisfil. There was one route that goes from Alliston to the Bradford GO train station. And the original route, when I was going to all the public meetings, is it was to do Highway 89 to Cookstown and then go down to Bradford. But somewhere between that open house I was at and when the route was finally determined, it now goes down through Beaton and across. And when I asked why that change was made, they told me it was because they didn't think Highway 89 was transit friendly. If the bus broke down, it wouldn't be safe on that highway. I do, however, note that as one of the largest contributors to the county budget, and I'm saying this very much with my mayor hat on and not with my deputy warden hat on, that we're paying for this transit system. In my opinion, it benefits the cities of Barrie and Orillia more than it benefits any member municipality. And I think, and they pay nothing towards it. And we get zero benefit from it, and we pay a lot towards it. So when we're just going into budget discussions right now, and I've asked the county to give us the subsidy per passenger, the cost of subsidy per passenger that it costs after the provincial gas tax, after what they collect in the fare box, what is the actual net subsidy per passenger that it's costing? And I just, I'm not saying it isn't a good system to have, but I think we all need to go into this budget knowing exactly what the cost is per passenger. Mr. Deloitte.
Your Worship, we've had some positive conversations with Simcoe County Transit staff. They operate about 28 buses currently, and not one comes into Innisfil. So, and we kind of said, well, what about us? And we've got some significant routes, and we need to connect our employment areas in transit, and there may be a slick way of doing that with, starting it. So the one thing to watch for is the county transportation master plan. We thought we had agreement, and it's showing up as no transit for Innisfil. So we're going to pursue that. So it's not just the budget, it's also the transportation master plan. We were trying to synchronize our plans as best we could, but that's kind of glaring in my view. And I don't know if any other members of the team have any comments, but that's a concern, and we're going to pursue it.
Thank you so much. And the Deputy Mayor and I will keep our eyes open for that. My question then was on page 128, 9.3, and it was traffic calming policy. And understanding that we have this separate process going on right now for traffic calming, including the pilot projects, how will that, will we incorporate that into this document, or will that be just when you were talking traffic calming, you refer to the other policy?
Through your worship, our original plan or original intention was that that policy would have been completed and that study completed before the transportation master plan was, and our original intention was to incorporate the policy into the transportation master plan. Unfortunately, the timing hasn't worked out on that, so that policy will come as its own document, probably early next year.
Thank you very much. And my final comment is on page 135 under 9.7.5, which is the recommendations regarding the parking management opportunities. And on the fourth bullet, it does bring me a bit of concern. It talks about a study anticipates that on-street parking in Alcona and Cookstown to be of further future concern, and a timeline should be established for periodic review of the parking utilization. So I can speak more for Cookstown than I can for Alcona, having lived there. But the on-street parking in the village is actually the only thing that calms the traffic. If there was no on-street parking, and I'm glad that the study also indicated the need for that east-west corridor to as a bypass or a truck route. But without that, the only thing that kind of makes traffic use other routes is the fact that there's a bottleneck, and it does take them a long time to get through down Highway 89 and 27. So therefore there is, not only does it calm the traffic, but it also encourages people to use other routes. So I would be very much opposed to doing away with the on-street parking, particularly on 89 and 27. In fact, as we heard at a local community meeting that happened a couple of weeks ago, residents who are on County Road 27 will pull their cars out of the driveway and park them on the road in order to stop cars from racing in two lanes to get in front of each other. So it's a tool used right now to as a traffic calming measure, and I'd be concerned about doing away with it. Mr. Deloitte?
Your Worship, we've had some debates about traffic calming on arterial roads. And the transportation engineer is stepping right up and going, no, arterial roads are to move traffic and ambulances and trucks and that kind of thing. And we're going, so what we've agreed upon, and you'll see it in this report and the traffic calming report that's coming, that the parking, on-street parking does provide friction and controls the speed of the traffic and makes it more livable. And if you think about it, between the campus and the RVH, we could end up with some, we're going to have a lot of interplay between the two. So places. So we're thinking of maybe having on-street parking in other locations which haven't yet urbanized. So we've given that some thought, and I'm going to turn it over to Carolina to finish up here.
Thank you, Director Deloyd. So through your worship, we definitely acknowledge that parking provides an important traffic calming function. It absolutely does. Some of our concerns in both Cookstown and Alcona that sort of are inspiring the need for further exploration of parking is not simply that people are parking on the road, but that there isn't sufficient parking for the demand. So trying to take a look at that and how best to accommodate that is one of the goals of that study in general, which is not, is not to say that any particular on-street parking would be eliminated. Certainly, once we start to get into looking at an east-west link that would effectively bypass Cookstown with Highway 89, we also have opportunities then to turn more of that streetscape into a pedestrian-friendly streetscape. And when we get to that point, that might involve removing some parking for more pedestrian space or space for things like patios, etc. But we're not there yet, and we need to go through all of those steps and do all of those explorations first. So certainly not something that will come anytime soon. And as Director Deloyd pointed out, we are looking through our traffic calming strategy at opportunities for ways to manage speed on these high volume arterial and major collector roads as well. So hopefully we'll get some good recommendations that come out of that then can be prioritized and incorporated into these locations.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I would concur off-street parking would be wonderful, but very much needed the on-street parking now in order to keep those transport trucks at least a car length away from the heritage buildings. Anyone else? I'm done my rant for the night. I'm feeling better. Seeing none, then we have a mover and a seconder to receive it and to adopt the transportation master plan. Great work, a lot of work for everybody, and thank you so much for those who worked on it. All in favor of the recommendation? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And now we will move to item D2, and that was Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. Can I have, thank you, Councillor Fowler, second the motion. I just wanted an opportunity here not to change anything, but ask for some explanations from staff, just so that the public understands what the Sustainability Action Plan is about, because this was brought to us once before, and this seems like Sustainability Action Plan light. It seems to be quite a bit different from what was given to us before. There was talk about the green standard and tiers and that kind of stuff. So I would like, first of all, an explanation for the public in terms of why the change in tone for this piece here. And then I have two other comments to make after I get a comment from staff. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Deloyd, this seems to be your night.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, through you. So there was some anticipated urgency to getting a sustainable development plan and checklist in place, thinking that development was more imminent than it actually is. So we do have the luxury of time to work on this. So that's one point. So our resolve hasn't changed. I can assure council of that. But one of the things that a deferral of the checklist, it allows three things. It allows us to work closely with the development liaison group. They understand that what's good for Orbit is good for the rest of Innisfil, and they'd like to participate in this conversation. We would like to get some public input, and Haraka is working on that and starting to branch out with the public piece. And the other thing is, in the orbit plan, we have some ambitious and modern and updated ideas about water saving, and certainly we're talking about district energy. We're talking about a number of pieces. And one of the things that the draft that we put before you didn't actually tie some of those pieces in. And we'd like to bring back a fuller package with all of the pieces and having had an opportunity to consult. So we've extended, if that is okay with council, if not, we need to know, but we've extended the timeline for comment for owners and public. And we'd like to start pulling the other pieces together that are baked into the secondary plan, which is moving along very quickly behind the scenes right now. There's a whole sustainability chapter in the secondary plan, and we need to make sure that the guidelines which deal with implementation line up with the secondary plan. So we've got a number of pieces. We'd like to bring it together as one package.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. I just want the public to understand that, because in the descriptions of both of them, they're quite a bit different. And so I just wanted them to understand what changes and why you made them. I guess my other component, other question was around the input. Like, the urgency piece is important to know that we're not as under the gun as we thought we were. But I guess my other question is that there seems to be a lot of reference to developers, builders groups, and some of the builders associated with this. Most builders don't want any standards. They, as Cortel says, we build great buildings the way they are. We don't need LEED. We don't need Toronto Green Standard. We don't need any of these things. So I hope you take their input with a grain of salt and check the many municipalities. And I know you have, because I know your experience and that kind of stuff. But I just want to make sure that that what gets put forward is important to climate change, is important to the community of Innisfil, that they may have their input, but there are lots of communities moving in this direction, and they are well aware, and they all participate in them readily. I just don't want an opportunity for them to detract or move our agenda sideways with this. So I'm also glad to hear that you mentioned the public piece to it. The last question I have is to do with the process. So the orbit is going ahead, development is going ahead, it's ongoing. It's not that it hasn't stopped, it's ongoing. At what time do developers need to know what these standards are? Because as we know, Cortel is designing the orbit right now. And if they don't have these standards right now, they're not going to make it into the plans down the road. So I guess what is the process when you need these to influence the orbit? And two, what is that timeline? What does that look like?
Okay, so one of the key aspects in orbit, we've been talking a lot about site planning and that kind of thing, but there's no roads, there's no services, it's a field, there's no train station. So there is a whole development phase that we need to follow. So there is time, and we are working with Cortel and their planner to make sure that the proper development processes are included. So we have a number of months. If we can set the framework up for sustainability in the secondary plan. So the secondary plan for orbit will guide everything. And then these guidelines follow that. It implements that. So we need to have the conversation about the approach and then the details of the guidelines. And I think that's the right order. So I think we're working on both, and council and the public and the developers and landowners will be involved in those discussions.
Just one follow-up then, and I'll allow anyone else to answer some questions. So I apologize for dominating the conversation. but the secondary plan is for the second phase. It's not for the core where the GO station is going to be. So are we going to miss the train? Sorry, the pun there, on getting any type of sustainability initiatives if we don't have sustainability action plan for the core, as opposed to the secondary plan, which is the next ring out on that. So that would be that's my last question, and I'll give up the floor.
The short answer is no. We won't miss the train.
Can I just ask for clarification, though? I thought this secondary plan was for the inner circle as well.
It's for the entire orbit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation to receive as information? Any opposed? That's carried. Next is the RISE recommendation. And can I ask Councillor Payne and Councillor Nicol to move and second our RISE recommendation and report back to formal council? All in favor? That is carried. And next is consideration of adoption of the recommendations from Committee of the Whole. And I could ask Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Ices to move and second that recommendation, please. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. There's no notices of motion or notices that a motion has been given. Are there any announcements from members of council? Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you, Worship. I just missed a point earlier from one of the committees that I was on this last while, and I'm just waiting for it to come up here. Let me just get it here. From the audit committee, I put a question forward, and I wanted to know what the insurance rates had gone up in our previous years that we're having to deal with the municipality. And I've got the figures just today that our insurance increases between 2020 and 2021 was 31%, 2021, 2022, 25% increase in our insurance policies for the municipality. And I think we were talking about this week at county, the same thing where we're really being slammed by the insurance industry and the impact it's going to have on all of us. And at the county, if we keep moving in the direction we're going with these increases, we could be looking between 3 and 5% increase in taxes at the county level over the next year or so. So this is something I just want to bring back up for information. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of comments. I was glad that Your Worship, you started the meeting tonight with the moment of silence for our former mayor, Stuart Fisher. I was at the funeral and the reception after on Monday, and it really gives you a neat sense of the community that we have, in Innisfil. To have Stu, as he was affectionately called, such a champion for the community and bringing that together. And then I thought after that, we had the community barbecue a few weeks ago at Stroud Arena with put on by John Broussard and MP John Broussard and MPP Andrew Kanjan. That community, it still exists here in Innisfil, and it was nice to feel that and to be a part of that celebration. So that was my first comment. And on another kind of somber note, I wanted to maybe recognize the loss in the agricultural community of the Klusterman farm on the weekend with the horrible fire and their loss, but also recognize the collaboration between the fire departments, and the conditions must have been horrible for the responders involved with the humidity of the day and the heat of the fire. And so a bit of hearty thanks to our first responders that we could see them work together in such a tragedy, and thoughts and prayers to the Klusterman family as well as they deal with the loss. Thankfully, there was no human loss, but obviously a loss in the agricultural community. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Ices. Yeah, the community really did come forward. The paramedics were there keeping a close eye on the firefighters during the whole fire. And as I understand, and you wouldn't be surprised that the agricultural community is so close-knit that there were several trailers there to take the dairy cattle off and have them milked and housed somewhere else, which yeah, it was just incredible to see the trucks and the trailers all lined up there, everybody willing to help. Councillor Nicol.
Your Worship, obviously we were off in July, and I'm currently on holidays right now too, enjoying my time off. But it's been there've been quite a few events that have occurred over the last couple of weeks. I just wanted to mention that I was happy to attend the return of both MP Broussard and MPP Kanjan's community barbecues the last weekend of July, or the barbecue itself, and also the grand opening of the 57th annual Georgian Bee Sting Show, along with yourself and MP Broussard the first weekend of August. We did have a constructive town hall type meeting hosted by our residents from Cookstown with Reverend Gilson on July 27th at the St. John's Anglican Church. I have to say it was great to be invited and to speak briefly at the Ontario Trillium Foundation's grant presentation for the South Snippet Theatre on August 4th. I was able to help sponsor the first 100 Men Who Give a Damn's Innisfil's golf tournament at Harborview on August 6th. Along with yourself, Worship, Councillor Ices, Amber, as well as Jen Ray and former Mayor Walkup and Mayor Jackson. I was very humbled to attend the very warm service at St. James Church on August 8th with former Mayor and Police Chief Stuart Fisher. I was happy to have a lady behind me say that Stu would have liked it if I was able to undo my button and loosen my tie in this kind of heat. So I did get a little bit of relief there. And surprisingly, that day I did learn that both Stu and I both attended the exact same high school in KW, KCI, although we definitely didn't do it in the same years. I am looking forward to judging at the Cookstown Cancer Classic Car Show, raising funds for RVH at the Steam Show lands this Saturday, August 13th from 10 till 2. And just two reminders, as this is really our last council meeting for essentially this term anyways, that the Guildford United Church is hosting their annual steak barbecue on August 20th, and you can pre-order for home cooking by August 15th, or show up for a sit down in person between 5 and 7 at the Guildford Community Church or United Church. And obviously, since we passed it tonight, Gussapalooza, will be descending on Cookstown for the weekend of September 16th, 18th, and it's going to be a great event for a lot of up and coming bands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Yes, the St. James United Church, where the celebration or the service for former Mayor Fisher was not air conditioned. So yes, it was quite warm, but it was a lovely service, and I was happy to see former Warden Dennis Ruffley and former Warden Jack Hunter attend. And then the Fisher family did come back to the Rizzarda Health and Wellness Center to visit the community room, the Betty and Stuart Fisher community room. They gave us some new pictures that we're going to put up in memory of Stu, along with his wife, Betty. Any other announcements? Councillor Asadi.
Just a reminder for the next Fresh Air Flicks Inside Out that is held at Innisfil Beach Park next Friday at 7 p.m. Starts with music activities, and it's free. So people bring a blanket, bring chairs, and library board members love to, the library's out with also helping. And it's a great free event for family to enjoy. And if it's raining, it will be held the next day on the Saturday. And Your Worship, I don't know if you're going to be letting our public know about the actual in-person next meeting with council?
Thank you, Councillor Orsatti. Yes, it will be nice to be back in person again. Although it will be, if anybody wants to watch the live stream, my staff in the clerk's office have worked very hard to try to make it still a good experience if you want to watch on the YouTube channel as well. But you're more than welcome to come out to council. Any other announcements? Seeing none, I had a couple. So sad and happy to announce the retirement of a couple of heroes in our community. Chief Andrew Fletcher is retiring. He will retire on September the 30th. He came to us from Halton and became our deputy chief and then took over as chief. And he's done such great work in our community, really leaving the police service in a good place and through a very, very difficult time. And he has been so proactive in work with the county through the local immigration partnership and also with the community safety and well-being plan. He's always championed preventive as opposed to reactive, proactive instead of reactive policing. Instead of pulling people out of the river, why don't we go upstream and find out why they're falling in the first place? And that's always kind of been Andrew's philosophy, and it's worked out very well for us. But I do wish him and his wife a very long and happy retirement together. And then the other member who will be taking semi-retirement is Reverend Howard Courtney. Pastor Courtney is turning over the reins to a new chief pastor at the Life Center. He'll still be around, but hopefully him and Beulah will be able to take more time off for themselves. So, like I said, happy and sad all at the same time for those two gentlemen. Then my only other announcement is, for the first time since August of 2019, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario will be meeting in person for the conference. First, there's a board meeting happening this Saturday and Sunday, and then Monday and Tuesday and half of Wednesday for the conference. And I'm pleased to be attending. We have a number of delegations with different ministers. This is our first, after the throne speech yesterday, our first chance to have conversations with the Premier and his cabinet. Many of them are new, and some of them are former mayors. So it's going to be exciting. In fact, the former president of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, is Graydon Smith, the former mayor of Bracebridge, who is now an MPP for the area and is the new Minister of Natural Resources. So it's going to be fun. And of course, Mayor Saunderson from Collingwood is also a new MPP. So it's going to be fun to see them in their new roles, and always a good time to sit down one-on-one with different ministries to get our asks and advocacy in for the town of Innisfil. So I'm looking forward to that. And any other announcements, I'll ask one more time, going once, going twice. All right, so then we'll move on to the confirming bylaw, and I would ask for Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Orsatti to move and second the confirming bylaw, and all in favor? That is carried. And finally, adjournment, as moved by Councillor Waters and seconded by Councillor Fowler, that we adjourn at 9:07. Before we do adjourn, I'll say that there will be a planning public meeting next Wednesday. I will be absent. Deputy Mayor Davidson will be chairing that meeting. And then the following meeting after that is the one that will be back in person. Am I correct? The public meeting's not in person, is it? Mr. Parkin?
Yes, Your Worship. Next Wednesday will be our first in-person hybrid electronic meeting. So Most council will be there in person, but participants can participate electronically or in person.
Okay, my apologies. Yeah, since I was away, I wasn't paying attention. So the first in-person meeting will be chaired by Deputy Mayor Davidson. It will be a planning public meeting, and hopefully it goes well and we can continue in that format in the hybrid in the future. So having said that, all in favor of adjournment? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy these last few weeks of summer. Oh, and I should also point out now that as of August the 19th will be lame duck. So still continuing with day-to-day business, but certainly with the lame duck, following the lame duck rules until the new council is put in place. So enjoy the rest of your summer, everyone, and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Recording
everyone.
stop.